Here you. Okay, so we're going to do a computer swap after Bruce's presentation today. So Barb, you're going to do an introduction?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll have her up in a minute. The one thing I want to say is that I had the pleasure 20 years ago of taking a planetary services class at the University of Colorado, taught by Bob Papalardo. And one of the things they did was a 5-day camping trip where we went out and explored planetary surfaces. We only had one planet to work with, but they found some good analogs. And Bruce came along on that and to help teach it.
Part of the head of them, right?
I was the leader of that trip.
Yeah.
Bob was the one who came along.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because we were leading my class, so Bob in his class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I was in Bob's class. So that's why. That's how it came across with me. Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. We got to see a lot of stuff. So I'm really glad that Bruce agreed to come give us a talk. So Barb, you ready to come?
You didn't tell us the joke about the t-shirt.
Yeah.
The whole point of the story of the field trip.
Well, it's the t-shirt, which you probably can't see on the camera there, is from the meteor crater, and just has a couple impact pictures. And somebody commented that it was amazing how close that meteor came to hitting the video center, the visitor center. So anyway, is that the joke you were thinking about?
The shirt was that you wore got it.
Oh.
Demonstrated that he was in charge.
Uh-oh, we're getting echo again.
Yeah.
It was George. I've muted. I'm going to mute everybody that comes on, just so you know.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, Barb, you ready to come up and do some introductions?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no. I thought you were gonna. Oh, yeah, come on.
No.
What you want to say? Yeah, so first thing is to hand out some, these are star maps for September. Yeah.
Is the Core War an eruption on this map?
So, yeah, thank you for all the new people who are here too. I think we have some people from VAS, and for those who don't know that, that's Boulder Astronomical and Space Society in Boulder. And I think they were maybe one of Leonard and my first inspirations way back before we started this 10 years ago as the Skywatchers here. We went to the first planetarium, and Bass was up there, and we saw the prominences through their solar telescope on the sun, not the moon. And you know, I think that was a real inspiration for us too. So we're not sure exactly when our next meeting will be. It'll probably be about a month, maybe more. I need to talk to Susie, who's probably on. We've got a number of people on Zoom, and we'll let you know. Make sure you're on the list. If you're not on, if you didn't get an email from us, you just saw us in the Mountain Messenger, which we want to say, Annette was amazing, the editor, getting this out a couple days ago. I know those of you who are over on South Beaver Creek get this, probably didn't get it yet. Yeah, but she did it, and we made page 3.
Yeah, page 3.
That's pretty special. Although we like to get centerfold. They're not naked astronomers, but okay. So, yeah, we thank all of you who are new here, and this is for Leonard and I. It's like,
Yeah.
and you're part of it. You come here once, you're a member. You don't need to do donations. We're just doing.
But we'll
yeah,
accept
good
them
example.
anyway.
That's okay. And, you know, oh, so bathrooms in the back, if you've never been to the center before, the community center. New deck out here, they had like a commemorative thing that we didn't come to.
They had an open house for the deck, and they had a tour of the deck, which is, you know,
I guess everyone had to walk.
we don't know
down.
what happened, but it must have been
Anybody
good.
was here for that? Anybody?
No, there you go.
But yeah, thank you for being here.
Gladly.
Yeah, and Leonard's gonna introduce Bruce. We've
I
known
will.
him for quite a while.
Yeah,
And here you go.
oh, okay.
If
Here's-
you need notes.
No,
Maybe not.
no, I don't need notes because I bothered Bruce Jakosky for decades. I'm a writer for space.com and Scientific American and a couple other places. And I won the whatever award it was. She gave me the award.
No.
Anyway, yeah, anyway, Bruce, you know, when you're a writer and you're looking for a quote and you want to know what's going on, really, I call Bruce, and he's been a great friend for a long time.
Wait.
It's not mine.
Nope.
All right, okay, we're good now.
Anyway, other than that, you know, these people are echoing what I was gonna say. So corny. But you know, Bruce has been a long-term friend, and you know, he is just to read his bio takes too long. He's been involved in Mars exploration for a long time, and Professor Emeritus at the University of Colorado Boulder. But you know, I just to cut it short, I mean, it's one of these guys that is in the know, and it's not in the know so much as he wants to know, because that's important too. There are questions that he's been asking about Mars exploration for a long time. He's solved some of the problems because he worked on several Mars exploration vehicles that have gone out there. And, you know, you can't do bad with Bruce. From a journalistic standpoint, he's, I think I've quoted him directly and didn't have to put in extra comments. I think, Bruce, let me get through with this and get you going, because it's a real pleasure to have him up here for the Skywatcher night here. And thank you for coming.
Thank you, Leonard.
Yeah.
You know, I wish my parents could have been here to hear that introduction. My dad would have liked it and my mom would have believed it. I'm going to try something different to start this. And Bob Grimm, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you identify the 4 objects in this picture from left to right?
Here.
If you can't hear, he got the Earth right.
Earth, Venus, Mars, and a fake planet.
But do you know which one?
Which one?
It's Tatooine.
Okay.
You know, I have to be careful with Bob, with Leonard in the audience, Clark online, because they know a lot about what I'm going to talk about. So to you guys in particular, if I say anything that is at all misleading or incorrect, please feel free to keep it to yourself.
If you say something that people need to find, then because you got general public people too, you know. So, yeah, define your evidence.
Yeah, if there's anything that is unclear that you need elaboration on, please interrupt with questions if they're pertinent. What I want to do is, you know, I was tempted to talk about Mars tonight and just leave it at that. But as much as that has been the heart of my research for almost 50 years now, the real questions are centered on what Mars can tell us about elsewhere, and in particular about life elsewhere. So I want to talk about the concept of planetary habitability. What makes a planet habitable to microbes, and what we're finding as we go and look out there. Let's see if I can make this work. So there are a lot of objects that people are talking about when you think about the possibility of life elsewhere, starting with Mars, and you'll recognize this picture. It's also the background on a lot of my charts. On Europa, one of the satellites of Jupiter, we see what look like icebergs that are one indication of the presence of an ocean, and that points to the potential for life. When we see exoplanets, whether it's Tatooine or other, people talk about the possibility of life on them, and that's one of the major questions in the community these days. And somebody's not muted.
Yeah.
And that ruined my perfectly good joke about UFOs and alien abduction. So I'll just ask, has anybody in the room here been abducted by aliens? I see a hand in back. Leonard, you are an alien. I want to start with a little bit of the why, because it's too easy to talk about the what and leave the why out. And one of the reasons we're interested in life elsewhere is to learn about life on Earth, to think about how unique we are, or whether we are unique or special. And I like this quote from Arthur C. Clarke. He says, there are two possibilities. Maybe we're alone, maybe we're not. Both are equally frightening. Think about that. It would be truly amazing to discover an example of life elsewhere that didn't have some genetic connection to life on Earth. It would be just as amazing, if not even more, to search and discover that we were it, that we were the only life in the universe. So think about that during the talk, and we'll come back to it at the end. If we're going to talk about the possibilities for life elsewhere, I want to start with the Earth, because life on Earth is the only example we know of life in the universe today. And in fact, all life on Earth shares a common biochemistry, represented by this DNA molecule on the left. And that means that we're descended from a single set of common ancestors, a single common ancestor. So really, all the life on Earth represents one example of life. And it's very hard to think about what the requirements for life are, what the environments capable of supporting life are, the extremes, when you have an example of one. So remember that as we go through. We're trying to extrapolate from our sample of one to what is the full range of possibilities. Before I get into this also begs the question of what is life? And I'm going to just punt on that. I'm going to fall back on Mark Twain's definition of life, and that is, it's just one damn thing after another. But the key things that I look at that tell us about the possibilities of life elsewhere are, first, the chart in the middle. Life arose very quickly here on Earth once it became possible for life to exist, once conditions allowed it. And this image is a fossil and a scientist's drawing of what we're seeing, a fossilized microbe dating back to 3.5 billion years. And there's evidence that that is not the oldest life. There's evidence that life could have existed as long ago as 4 billion years. Since the Earth formed at 4.5 billion, it became habitable maybe at 4.3. Life arose very quickly on Earth. It seems as if it's a very natural consequence of chemistry operating in a dirty planetary environment. We don't know that because we don't know what the origin of life was here on Earth, but it's something that it would point to. The other example we have is in the figure on the right, which is Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone. You can see people on the boardwalk back here for scale. So it's what, about 40, 50 meters across. All the colors represent different organisms that like to live at different temperatures. The orange is the coolest, then yellow, the blue, or the organisms there like to live in the hottest stuff. Life thrives, certain kinds of life thrive in what we think of as extreme environments. If you jumped in here to go swimming, you would die. It would boil you, it would kill you. These organisms that live there, if you bring them out to room temperature, they would die. It's too cold for them and they can't function. So life can exist in a wide range of environments that we're not used to thinking about. Everything from sub-freezing up to temperatures above the boiling point of water. If we look at the range of things and think about how life operates, we can write down what we think are a few simple requirements for an environment to be able to support life. The first is access to the biogenic elements, things like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, iron, and about 15 or 20 others. These are going to be present. Well, let's start with the first ones. I mentioned carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. They're present as gases or liquids or solids here on Earth. They're very available. All the rest are present in any rocky environment that has sort of the range of materials that we expect to find in the solar system. Excuse me, by the way, I'm fighting a cold, so I'm hoping I won't lose my voice tonight. But if you hear me sniffle every now and then, I'm not crying at the science, although it sometimes does bring me to tears. The second requirement is a source of energy that can drive metabolism. And I've got that represented on this chart by two things. First, the sun, which is smiling because we love to get energy from the sun. Plants are photosynthetic. Animals eat plants and get their energy from the sun that way. We eat plants or animals that eat plants and get our energy that way. But that's only one way. The other way is from chemical reactions. And this other thing is a hand sample of a rock. It's about as big as your fist, where the organisms live in the pore space in the rock, and they get their energy from the chemical reactions between the water and the rock, water occupying the pore space as well. It's likely that that source of energy was the first source of energy for life on Earth, because photosynthesis is a very complex set of processes in order to take energy from the sun and convert it to chemical energy. Water rock reactions are a much easier source of energy, and any planet that has rock and water has the potential for that kind of interaction. The third requirement is liquid water. It acts as a medium in which nutrients can diffuse into an organism, waste products can diffuse out. It fills the volume of cells, and on early life or simple life, reactions between water and rock can provide energy to support life. There are other liquids, but if you limit yourself to water, you're not very limiting. Other liquids that we know about in our solar system, at least, are at temperatures too cold to be able to support chemical reactions. And if you look at the abundance of things in the galaxy outside of our solar system, water is relatively abundant. The last thing I wrote is pretty vague: suitable environmental conditions. You need temperatures that aren't so cold that chemical reactions won't go forward. You need temperatures that aren't so hot that all the chemicals will denature. You know, DNA and RNA and proteins in our bodies in life on Earth, if you get up above about 150 degrees C, they just break apart. And if that happens, they can't carry out the functions. We're looking for life elsewhere on a rocky planet that has liquid water on it. Everything else we can debate, but I think those are pretty straightforward requirements. So I'm going to jump before I get into our solar system. I want to talk about exoplanets, because one of the big questions is, are there any exoplanets, planets around other stars that are habitable? This is an artist's view of about 1,000 of them. I did not do this. Somebody actually did, though. We know of about 6,000 planets around other stars. I put about because the number changes every day. Last time I looked, it was around 5,800 or 5,900. Not all of them are shown on this chart. This has about 1,000, but it has them plotted as a function of the mass of the planet on the vertical axis and the orbital period on the horizontal axis. Earth is there at 1 Earth mass, not surprising. I hope that's not surprising. And an orbital period of 365.25 days. What you notice is that the planets, all the exoplanets, group into clumps. There's a clump at very short periods and high masses around the mass of Jupiter. By the way, the rust-colored dots represent our solar system. So masses around the mass of Jupiter and really short periods. Masses in the range between Earth and Uranus and Neptune and short periods, and then Jupiter-sized things with long periods. Our solar system falls outside of this whole range, but keep in mind this could be an artifact of the observing. We're looking for planets around other stars. We measure them by watching the star wobble back and forth as the planet goes around it. And we haven't been looking for long enough to be able to detect Earth mass planets with periods of, say, 1,000 days. We need to watch for a couple of those periods. The heavier planets like Jupiter mass are easier to detect. So it's not clear yet whether our solar system is special or unique, but we have to keep in mind that it might be. We just don't know enough yet. So that's the occurrence of planets. The second half of the equation is, are they habitable? And you want to think about it as a planet being close enough to the star to be warm so that ice would melt, but not so close that it's too hot and any organisms would die, any chemicals would denature. This is an attempt by Jim Casting and colleagues to define that habitable zone, that range where conditions are just right. And you can see between the left line where it's too hot, the right line where it's too cold, things can exist. And this is shown for different stellar masses. The lower mass stars are cooler. And if you want to be warm enough to have liquid water, you have to be close. The heavier stars are hotter and you can be farther away. There's a range in there that is the habitable zone where things are just right. And we actually have 3 planets in the habitable zone. Earth is right in the middle. Mars, even though it doesn't have conditions that you would think of as habitable, and I'm going to come back and talk about that, is within the habitable zone, because if you took the Earth and moved it to Mars, I'm not suggesting we do this, but if you could do that, the thicker atmosphere, the greenhouse warming would allow it to have habitable conditions. So Mars sort of defines the outer edge of the habitable zone. Venus defines the inner edge. It has a hot runaway greenhouse atmosphere that traps too much heat to be habitable, but it's not clear that it was always that way. It's possible that Venus started out cooler, more Earth-like, and as the sun heated up through time and the habitable zone moved outward, it's possible that that too hot zone caught up with Venus and caused it to enter this runaway greenhouse state. We don't really understand the full details of this because we only have a sample of a few planets. This is another way of looking at that same graph, but now it has the previous 2 superimposed. every planet on here lies in the habitable zone between too cold on the right, too hot on the left. And at the top, I've shown Earth, Venus, and Mars. This is the amount of starlight the planet gets and the size, basically the size of the star. So the more massive stars produce more energy and the habitable zone will be farther away. But since this is plotted as a function of how much sunlight, how much starlight it gets, you don't see that. Most of these planets are Jupiter-like planets. A small number are Earth-like planets, maybe a dozen or so. Those are the ones that we're thinking about in terms of habitability. One of the things you can think about is if a planet is habitable, does it stay that way? And I put this chart in here because it's possible that the ultraviolet light, the extreme ultraviolet, very short wavelengths, the EUV from the star can strip away gas out of the atmosphere. The small stars have had much more active emissions in the EUV and can strip it away more easily. On this chart, these are spectra of our sun and some of the different M stars. I find this hard to look at, so I sort of did an eyeball average where the more massive stars put out more EUV energy, especially early in their history, and can strip away gas. But I don't think that the EUV is the only story. The astronomers, the astrophysicists tend to look at this. They only care about the stellar EUV because they can measure it. They don't recognize all the other processes that can affect an atmosphere. And that's what I want to talk about now. We're going to move outside, we're going to move back inside our solar system and look at what we can learn about the nature of habitability by looking at the planets in our solar system. And we're going to start with Mars because, well, of course we're going to start with Mars. Those of you who know me understand that. But Mars is actually a really good laboratory for studying volatile evolution because it has so many of the processes that can affect the atmosphere operating. You know, if you look at this, up on the top row, we have Mars today, which is a desert-like, often dust-covered planet. The middle and the top shows it from the surface. From the Viking 1 lander, you can see rocks and dust and wind-blown dust and not much else. But on the top right, you see that there has been water. These are what are called valley networks that used to be thought of as river tributary systems, but we don't call them that because we want to make sure we're not biasing our thinking. So we give them the generic name of valley networks, and we just say out loud that they were caused by running water flowing over the surface. You can tell from the number of craters that these were active billions of years ago, 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. The bottom right is an image taken from the Curiosity rover inside of Gale Crater, and it shows broken up mudstones because Gale Crater used to have liquid water filling it as a lake within the crater. And the two pictures on the left are Jezero crater, where the Perseverance rover is. And let's see, I'm not sure how to do this. The crater on the left is about 40 or 50 kilometers across. That box on the left is blown up in the middle, and you can see delta deposits, debris that was deposited by water when it flowed into the crater and carried the debris in. The water slows down when it hits a lake and drops its deposit. This is very typical of what you see on Earth when water, running water enters still water, like the Mississippi runs into the Gulf of Mexico. Gulf of Mexico, got that?
Yeah.
Or when any river, any stream runs into a lake. You can see where the water flowed in here and then immediately started depositing, and the water flowed out over on the right. We see a lot of activity by water. The fact that there was so much water so much evidence for water early in history means that there must have been something to warm up the planet more than it is today, because it's too cold for liquid water to exist. So there must have been a greenhouse atmosphere providing warming, and that greenhouse would have included a lot of CO2. So one of the big questions for Mars is, where did the water go? Where did the CO2 go? And we spent a lot of time trying to understand what processes can have operated there. I was the head of the MAVEN project. MAVEN stands for Mars Atmosphere and Volatile Evolution Mission. The N at the end of MAVEN is the N at the end of evolution. And you have no idea how much grief I got over that, since it's not a pure acronym. All I can say is you should see the other names that were suggested. MAVEN was designed to understand the role played by loss of atmospheric gas to space in changing the climate. So we measure on the left the loss of hydrogen. This is, well, it's actually the amount of hydrogen in the upper atmosphere, but the loss to space is proportional to that. And you can see that we've measured it, that it varies by a factor of 10 and seems to be related to how much dust is in the atmosphere, because the amount of hydrogen goes up when there's more dust. In the middle, we've measured the oxygen being lost. We've measured the speed and the direction. The colors represent how much oxygen there is. The arrows, if you can see them, represent what direction it's moving. And we can understand, we can measure the loss rate today. We understand the processes and know how to extrapolate back in time. That's shown in the panel on the right, which is the loss rate. Globally, average loss rate is a function of time going back for 3.5 billion years before the present. The solar extreme ultraviolet was greater, just as it was on the exoplanets, and that would drive greater atmospheric loss. So we can add up how much oxygen and hydrogen has been lost over time and infer that that tells us something about the amount of water that has been lost. And without going through the numbers, I'll just tell you that that loss process is a major process in the history of the Martian atmosphere. It took a lot of the gas away, took it to space, and thinned out the atmosphere. The CO2 was no longer as effective as a greenhouse gas. The water was no longer able to be liquid and carve things on the surface. But that's not all, because there are geological processes that can operate on the surface that also affect water and CO2. The first is that these can interact with minerals on the surface, with rocks, and get sucked up. The water can form hydrated minerals, things like serpentine. The CO2 can form carbonates. This is a map of the planet showing where all of these minerals have been identified on the surface. Everything you see here is either water or CO2 bearing. The green, there's really only a few spots of green are carbonates. Everything else is water bearing. So the surface has taken up a fair amount of water and CO2. Give it a second for someone to have muted. Yeah. We can add up how much there is, how much water has been taken up by these minerals, how much CO2, and it appears to have been a significant. Is somebody still unmuted? Great. We can add up how much water has been taken up by these minerals.
Right, we're not controlling you.
George, do you have a question?
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think we're good. That's okay. I can go with the flow.
Yeah.
But if it comes up one more time, I'm going to yodel.
Your words are so good. We love to hear the echoes.
Like New York, New York, the town's so nice they named it twice. We can add up how much water and CO2 have been taken up in these minerals, and this has been a significant process as well. Most of the activity appears to have happened in the first 1 or 2 billion years in Mars history, but that's when a lot of the water-related features were formed. And as the water disappeared, the features disappeared. The second process I want to point to, and this is unique to Mars, is that there are what we call outflow channels where water appears to have come up from beneath the surface and flowed out over the surface. So if you look at this picture, off on the right is jumbled chaotic terrain where we think water came up from under the surface. And at the left, you can see flow features. You can see striations that the water carved. It's a water carved channel. That source region is about 20 kilometers across and 2 kilometers deep. So we think that the water existed as liquid water within the crust below a frozen layer 2 kilometers thick. It was pressurized and forced out. The key part of this is that there was liquid water in the crust, and it sat there for between 1 and 2 billion years before it came out to the surface. It was protected from being stripped away by the solar ultraviolet light, and was protected for long enough that once it came out, it probably was not going to be lost. Think about how that applies to the exoplanets, where all they're doing is looking at the ability of the EUV light to strip away molecules. The third is we can look at water and CO2 that were released out of the interior by volcanic eruptions. On Earth, you look at volcanoes, even those that come from the deep mantle, and they bring water and CO2 to the surface. They outgas, they put it into the atmosphere and increase the amount of water and CO2. Because we have volcanoes on Mars, we know that this has been an operative process there as well. So from looking at Mars, we see a lot that tells us about what controls volatiles, water and CO2, and how they might evolve with time, independent of what can get stripped away to space. So let's look at the other planets in our solar system, the other terrestrial planets, Venus and Earth, because nature has done this incredible experiment for us of giving us 3 planets with atmospheres with different boundary conditions. Earth has a modest size atmosphere. It has a magnetic field. Venus has an atmosphere that is 100 times thicker and it has no magnetic field, but it's the same mass as the Earth. Mars is 1/10 the mass of the Earth, half the radius roughly. It has a thin atmosphere 100 times smaller than the Earth's atmosphere, and it has locally magnetized crust. Think of it as being able to protect the atmosphere locally. You know, if you go to a football game and it's raining, you put up your umbrella and you're not going to get wet even if the guy next to you is. Mars has these umbrellas of local magnetization that protect the atmosphere, but the atmosphere is connected everywhere. So the places that aren't magnetized lose atmosphere, but at a smaller rate. The geological and geophysical behavior of these guys is very, very different. And what we've learned from looking at these planets, I'm not going to go through them in the same detail that I went through Mars, because we'd be here all night. But what we've learned is that the geology and the geophysics of the planet play an important role in the history of volatiles. And just as important, that we can't predict ahead of time how they're going to behave. You know, we can look at Mars and see those outflow channels and say, yeah, they must be carved by water. But we didn't predict ahead of time that something like that would exist. By the way, you can ask, why do I think it was carved by water? And other people have suggested other fluids that could carve out material. The wind, eroding material, lava can carve out channels. There was a suggestion of liquid SO2, sulfur dioxide. My favorite suggestion was photochemically produced hydrocarbons. Think of it like Wesson oil falling out of the atmosphere, flowing over the surface. And there's a very subtle technical argument that tells us that these those channels were carved by water. And I'm gonna go through it because I think it's worth going through, but I recognize that it may go over the heads of some of you. We think that these were carved by liquid water, those channels, because they looked like they were carved by liquid water. Did I go too fast on that? Should I say it again? Maybe try different words. But when we look at all three planets, we see very different behaviors, and we can understand after the fact why each planet behaves that way, but we can't predict ahead of time. So when we look at planets around other stars, even terrestrial planets, keep in mind, we can't predict from just the size and the mass what we're going to find. People are trying to measure the atmospheric composition, look for things that might tell us about the presence of atmospheres, the presence of life, but we can explain it after the fact, but we can't do it from first principles. So I want to talk in the last part of this about searching for life elsewhere. And I'm going to start with Mars again, because Mars is the only planet where we've searched for life, where we have samples. We sent a spacecraft to the surface to look for evidence for life. That was the Viking spacecraft. We have meteorites that have come from Mars. So we have samples in our laboratories here on Earth. We've examined it on the surface with rovers, with very sophisticated measurements. With Viking, excuse me just a second here. This does bring me to tears. I'm sorry. With Viking, we sent 3 experiments designed to look for evidence of metabolism. They were looking for different ways that metabolism might show itself. And all 3, people don't remember this, but all 3 experiments initially showed positive results. And they did a control experiment after that, where they heated the sample up to, I think it was 140 degrees C or something like that for days, and then ran the experiments again. And on 2 of them, they had the same positive results. So people didn't think that was life. On the 3rd, which I've shown here, the labeled release experiment, it killed the reaction. So we have two lines up at the top that show the release of carbon out of the sample when you add nutrients and water, and then the flat line at the bottom that shows no reaction. To this day, the investigators who did that, well, until they died, believed that they had detected life. But there was another experiment on board that looked for organic molecules. And if there were organisms, it would have detected the organics from the organisms. And there would have been enough organisms that would have had to have been present to produce that kind of a reaction that it would have detected them, and it didn't. So we don't think that that was indicative of life. It was chemistry, perhaps driven by oxidized materials in the soil. Today, we've measured the presence of hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, and the presence of perchlorates, ClO4 minus something or other. And these are the type of oxidants that would produce this type of a reaction. The middle panels show the Mars meteorite Allen Hills ALH 84001. We collect most of the meteorites in our collection now by going down to Antarctica, pulling them off the ice. Nobody took a picture of collecting that particular sample, but I put a picture of collecting a different sample. Whoops, don't want to trip over the cord. This was collected in the Allen Hills region in the 1984 expedition, and it was the first rock they picked up that season. They saw things in it that looked like fossilized microbes, what you see in the bottom image here. And they saw other things, disequilibrium chemistry, indicated by layers of within the rock filling what used to be pore spaces, things that look like organized magnetite grains, similar to those that are produced by magnetotactic bacteria here on Earth. And some investigators concluded that was evidence for life. it took 5 years and 500 analyses in different laboratories to reach a consensus that these features are not indicative of life. In fact, they are either indicative of being artifacts by the processing necessary to produce images like this, or produced by water flowing through the rock in a geological environment. This happens regularly on Earth. So yes, they could be life, but the features that you see are not uniquely connected to life, and they're very understandable in a straightforward way without looking to life. I think the consensus is we're not going to answer the question from these samples. As an aside, people tend to forget that when they picked the rock up, they picked it up out of a puddle, because this is summertime and some of the ice melts, and they found Earth organisms actively living within the rock, within the outer portions of it. So keep that in mind. You can have contamination. On the right is the Curiosity rover, which has detected long chain hydrocarbons, organic molecules shown in that image on the bottom. These are the sort that could be decay products from biological activity, but they could also be produced in situ on the surface through chemical reactions, and they can be brought in by meteorites. So we don't, even though it's awfully suggestive, you can't conclude that it's biological. Even with samples, even with spacecraft on the surface, we haven't been able to demonstrate that life is there. How are we going to do it for Mars? Well, we've been collecting samples at Jezero Crater. We're hoping to bring them back to Earth and study them in labs here on Earth. I think that's the next best bet for answering the question. I want to go to Venus because recently people are talking about the potential for life in the Venus atmosphere, and it provides a good analog for how we might look for life in the atmosphere of a planet around another star. And that is, you can't send a spacecraft to the surface of an exoplanet, but you can look at the composition of the atmosphere by measuring the spectrum. And I showed, remember also, by the way, that the Venus surface is way too hot for anything to exist with life. But if you go up to the cloud level, temperatures are very Earth-like. You know, at the 1 bar level, which is the atmospheric pressure we have here, temperatures are very Earth-like. See if I can read this. Here's 1 bar. Temperatures are just over 300 K. That sounds like Earth to me. So people are looking at life. The spectrum that they've measured shows this dip that they've interpreted is due to phosphine, pH 3. Phosphine on Earth is predominantly produced as a byproduct of biological activity, but it can also be produced by atmospheric chemistry or photochemistry. It can be brought in by meteorites. The authors who published this have arguments as to why those aren't valid, but I think we don't know enough about the chemistry of the clouds in the Venus atmosphere to have an answer as to whether this could be biological or might not be. And I show this because it leads into the discussion of exoplanets, and in particular K2-18b rolls right off the tongue, just like ALH-840001. We're getting to the point where we can measure the spectrum of these objects as they pass in front of the star. You can see light that has passed through the atmosphere of the planet. And in particular, in this range between 6 and 12 microns, they detect features that they interpreted as being due to dimethyl sulfide or dimethyl disulfide. And this first dip at around 7.5 microns is both of those, and then this broad low between about 8 to 10 microns. Those are indicative of those molecules. They also point to this dip over on the far right, but those error bars on the measurements are pretty big. The first question is, are the detections unique? The second question is, could they be biological? And as with Venus, what they are finding is that, yes, It appears to point toward DMS and DMDS. But again, we don't know, and I think we don't know enough about the chemistry of these objects to know whether they could be produced non-biological. Maybe I'm just a stick in the mud, but I think that you have to understand the whole system before you can reach a conclusion. The author of this paper said this is the strongest evidence yet for life on an alien planet. The consensus that I'm reading up to very recently is, nah, it's not convincing at all. So have we detected life elsewhere? You know, we have places where we think life could exist. In our solar system, I would I'll point to the clouds of Venus, so even though I think it's implausible. Earth has life. Mars has the potential for life today, or at some time in the past when liquid water was abundant at the surface. On my first chart, I showed Europa, which has an ocean covered with ice, and where that ocean meets the rock at the bottom, you have the potential to support life. I read just the other day that people are looking at the asteroid Ceres as a possible place where life could have existed, because there's evidence that there was liquid water early on, and liquid water rock reactions, why not? Outside of our solar system, we have something like 6,000 known planets, and probably gazillions more. That's a technical term, gazillions. And we don't know, well, some of them reside within the habitable zone, but we don't know if they have atmospheres. We don't know if they have liquid water. I think within the next 5 to 10 years, if not day after tomorrow, we're going to see some detections of things that really point toward not just being in the habitable zone, but being habitable. That won't tell us that there was life there, but we're moving toward that. So I think the answer is no, we have not detected life elsewhere. We still know of one planet in our galaxy, in the universe, that has life, and that's the Earth. By the way, as an aside, Mars is the only planet we know of in the universe that is populated entirely by robots. That's not relevant to anything, except that it's too fun a fact not to throw out there. Where do we go from here? I put some things up here. For Mars, we're hoping to do sample return. This keeps being in the budget, out of the budget, in the budget, out of the budget. Eventually, we'll get samples from Jezero Crater, I hope, because they picked rocks that have the best chance of having had life and retaining some chemical remnant of that. And when we get them back and can examine them in the lab, we're going to learn a lot. Europa, we're sending, there are 2 spacecraft en route to Europa. One is the European JUICE mission. The other is the US Europa Clipper mission. Both of them have the possibility of detecting the presence of life through what they see on the surface, or having been ejected into the corona extending above the surface. Titan is going to be explored by the Dragonfly mission. I forget when that launches, but I'll just say later in the decade or early next decade, and that'll probably cover me. It has instruments that if there is life, if it is abundant, it will be able to tell us. That is, it has a mass spectrometer. I think that's the key instrument. I put Venus on the bottom left because Rocket Labs is building a spacecraft specifically to go to Venus to look for evidence for life. That's what you call high risk, high reward. The odds are very much in favor of finding none, but if it does, that would be pretty spectacular. However, we've learned with the Viking mission to Mars, you can't go for the gold right away because there's so much you just don't know about the environment. And we've had to learn through many, many missions subsequent to Viking enough to tell us what we should have done with Viking. James Webb Space Telescope is examining the atmospheres of exoplanets and the properties of exoplanets. And the Habitable Worlds Observatory will be able to image planets around other stars. I think HWO has like a 30-meter telescope compared to James Webb's 10-meter. It's much bigger, much more capable, higher resolution, higher light throughput. There's a lot going on. I think when I pick up the newspaper, I don't go a week without finding a major discovery in one of these areas that raises the interest about life elsewhere. And I have my last chart here with a quote that gets at the question of why we're doing this. You know, I think it's fair to ask why we are going to other planets, what the interest is in looking for evidence for life. And my view is when we're trying to understand how planets work, part of it is because we live on a planet. We want to understand how unique the Earth is, how the Earth ended up how it is. And by studying the Earth, you learn a lot, but by studying other planets, you can learn how unique the Earth is, what processes give rise to what outcomes, and what we might find when we go elsewhere. In looking for life elsewhere, well, we're a sample of life. We're interested in how unique we are. Is there life elsewhere? Could there be intelligent life elsewhere? What are the conditions that give rise to life? And I put this up here, this quote up here, because I think it summarizes things from a poem by T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We're trying to understand the nature of life on Earth. So we're looking to find even a single other example of life elsewhere that we can compare with life on Earth. I asked my students a decade or so ago to comment on this, and one of the students wrote something that I should put as a quote on here because it's so good. We're looking for life because we're looking for ourselves. We're trying to understand our own existence. And with that, I will stop here and see if you have any questions. Thank you. How do you want to do this, Dewey?
Well, let's start here in the hall, see if anybody has any questions. It's dumb, I thought about it. When you pick up a rock in Antarctica, how do you know it's from Mars?
The question, if you didn't hear that, is when you pick up a rock in Antarctica, how do you know it's from Mars? First of all, the odds are really good it's not an Earth rock because it's sitting on top of the ice. They do find Earth rocks that get scraped up as the ice circulates, and they get scraped up off the bottom. But the arguments for these being Martian is first, these are volcanic rocks that we have about 300 Mars meteorites in our collection. So we have a wide range of them. They represent about 200 individual falls. You know, from some of them, we have many rocks that fell in the same place at the same time. We look at them and we see most of them are young volcanic rocks, younger than 1 billion years. That means they have to come from one of the bigger planets to be active late in history of the solar system. That means Earth, maybe the Moon, Venus, Mars. When you measure the composition of the oxygen, it absolutely rules out the Earth and the Moon. And that leaves Venus and Mars. It's easier to knock something by an asteroid impact off the surface of Mars and have it get here than it is to knock it off the surface of Venus. But the kicker is that some of these rocks have a component of gas trapped within the rock that is thought to have been implanted into the rock from the atmosphere by the asteroid impact that knocked it into space. And the composition of that gas is identical to the composition of the Martian atmosphere and different from any other source of gas we know of in the solar system. So that really ties them uniquely to Mars. Either they're from Mars or we don't understand diddly squat about the solar system. I like that first option.
You know, you commented on the question, but I was wondering what you said as boundary condition for defining life, like would an autopilot chemical network be satisfactory for creating polymers? For
the question really is I'm going to generalize because I can't answer your question, but I can answer a general version of that. You know, what are the characteristics of life? What does define life? Is that a fair restatement?
Yeah, because you're looking for certain signatures, there's certain boundary conditions that you set.
Well, there
Labeling, because you use the word label, or you label life.
there are two aspects then. The first is, how do we know something is alive? And the second is, how do we detect it? We don't have a definition of life because you can't define it from having only a single example like we have here on Earth. But we can describe characteristics of life that we think would have to apply to life anywhere. It has to be able to reproduce. It has to pass on genetic information. That is, you don't see people giving birth to microbes, giving birth to cats and dogs. It has to be something like what it was. We see them taking in resources and utilizing them, growing, giving off waste products. If an entity, I don't want to use the word organism, if an entity meets all of these criteria, it probably is highly likely that it's life. I didn't say definitely, but likely. If it only meets one or two, it is likely that it is not life. So that question is different from how do you detect it. And to detect it, you want to look for something that is produced by life that isn't produced by non-life. And, you know, if we went to Europa and found a DNA-like molecule, doesn't have to be exactly DNA, that would be pretty compelling. If we go to Mars and find DNA, well, how do we know it didn't come from Earth? That's always the question. At less extreme, there are things like phosphine that might be biosignatures, but also might have other mechanisms for producing them. It becomes a difficult question. I think every biosignature that has been suggested as being indicative of life, clever people are able to figure out non-biological ways to produce it. And ultimately, I think we're only going to know if we get it back in the laboratory here on Earth and can study it.
It sounds like autocatalytic chemical networks that would satisfy those requirements.
Yeah.
And nucleotides are found widely, right?
Yeah.
So but you would need them in polymer form, you're saying, to
Yeah.
find them. Okay.
Yeah.
I have several of them. Let's think about the fact that these planets can increase in their surface than over time. Now, for the Earth, we have all this biological activity. So how do what about Mars, this stuff coming in? And that leads to my question. I really have is, what about subterranean life? Life is now subterranean and different energy from what was there.
So there are two questions you're asking. The first is stuff at the surface, or your comment, stuff at the surface can be produced coming in from outside. We have meteorites coming in, increasing the mass of the planet, increasing the size, at least somewhat, and bringing in organic molecules, bringing in water and CO2, and all of that is correct. If meteorites have come from Ceres and Ceres has had life, they might even bring a remnant of life. The second question you asked about was subterranean life, life beneath the surface. And I talked about life that lives in rocks, and I'm thinking of beneath the surface, down to depths of as much as kilometers, where you can have liquid water and still have temperatures that are not so high that they would destroy any biological activity. So I think that's very plausible, but it becomes a difficult question of how would you detect it? You know, can we drill down kilometers beneath the surface of Mars or elsewhere? Probably not within my lifetime. Can we drill down beneath the surface of an exoplanet? Probably not. But can something produced below the surface work its way up to the surface, perhaps overturning by impact that ejects material out, brings up material that has been at depth, perhaps by volcanism where lava coming up can bring stuff from the country rock, the surrounding rock, with it and put it into the atmosphere. That's a possibility. So I think it becomes a very complex problem and one that we don't quite know how to deal with.
The possibility there could have been life that was uncovered up and over billions of years, but still exists.
Yeah, the question was, is it possible there could have been life below the surface that still exists down there? And the answer has to be yes, both for Earth, for Mars, for Europa, way down at the bottom of that ocean. Do we want to go to any remote questions?
Well, let's see, we're getting here. Get more, okay, we'll get there.
Go for it.
By the way.
The things that life, things have been brought to Earth by comets or meteors or whatever. Where did that come from?
That's the problem.
What we've done is push the question further up.
Just this morning, I was reading about a paper that talked about that. The idea that maybe the life was transplanted to Earth, but that just moves the problem of origin of life somewhere else. But it's a fair question because we have rocks being transported from Mars to Earth, and some of those rocks could contain organisms, and those organisms can survive that trip, maybe, and you have the ability to move life between planets. If we find life on Mars, the question then becomes, is it genetically related to life on Earth? Do they share a common origin and it was transferred from Earth to Mars? Or could life have originated on Mars and been transferred to Earth? But
Ceres and come to both.
well, then, yeah, come from Ceres and come to both. It just begs the question of where and how did life originate, and what are the characteristics? If we find Martian life and instead of DNA, it has a molecule that can serve that same function but has a completely different structure, it probably had a separate origin. Mark.
So, I'll try the word that's open-minded. What do you think of terror? Now, I think you'll be like me, negative on that, because we may destroy life that's there, but I'll try to be open-minded.
What do I think about terraforming Mars? We could areaform Earth and make it look like Mars. Okay, terraforming. What can we do to Mars to change its atmosphere so that the surface environment looks like the Earth's? We would have to warm the temperature up from the current minus 50 degrees C up to melting, up to 0 degrees C at least. We would have to mobilize, to do that, we'd have to mobilize some greenhouse gas. We'd have to mobilize water to be able to utilize it. And maybe if we did that, we could grow crops on the surface and walk around on the surface without spacesuits. There are so many directions I could go with this. I'll start with, if you wanted to terraform Mars, there are things you need to know about Mars to start thinking about it. Those are the same things I want to know just to understand Mars. So I think that for the next 30 years, it doesn't matter whether we want to or not, we're still doing the same missions and the same measurements. Maybe we'll send people. We'll see what happens. If we do want to terraform Mars, one of the problems is, where are you going to get the CO2 to warm up the atmosphere? And there is CO2. There's probably enough CO2 that if you could mobilize it and put it in the atmosphere, it would warm the planet up like that. But it's globally distributed as carbonate minerals or within the soil. And you would have to strip mine the entire planet to get at it. I don't think that's feasible, and you would destroy any reason to go there by strip mining the entire planet. People are coming up with clever alternatives. There was a paper a couple of decades ago, actually, looking at the ability to manufacture high efficiency chlorofluorocarbons that would act as very efficient greenhouse gases. That's feasible, but you need a manufacturing capability that's humongous. You know, huge factories, and we haven't even sent people. So that's far into the future. Just recently, I read another suggestion about shooting dust into the atmosphere that is manufactured so it would have a certain size and shape and act as a greenhouse gas, act like one. And that could do it, but you need a big manufacturing capability, and everything on the surface would get covered with this dust, which has its own problems. So I don't think it's feasible, certainly not for the foreseeable future. And if you're talking about, well, what about 100 years from now? Sure, why not? You can invent anything, as long as it's 100 years away. My view is we should just take all the CO2 from the Venus atmosphere, move it to Mars, and then we have 2 terraform planets. How do you do that? I will leave that as an exercise.
So many though.
Yeah, I'm back.
Have you heard about the evil genius idea of just using nuclear weapons against the Martian ice caps to terraform it?
Yeah, nuclear weapon use has never been a bad idea, has it? The problem is that the ice caps don't contain enough CO2 to do that. They contain, we think, the equivalent of only about as much gas as is in the atmosphere. So you could double the pressure, that would raise the temperature by a degree, which ain't enough to do it. So no, I don't think it's a good idea.
Where do you think are the most likely places on Mars to look for signs of previous life? And are the robotic missions there going there, or are the future missions that are going to go there?
Where should we look for ancient life on Mars? Let me give you a generic answer and then a specific answer. The generic answer is you want to look for places where the geological evidence suggests that all the criteria for being able to support life have been met, and where samples might retain some remnant of those processes, some memory. So you would go to the ancient heavily cratered highlands where they existed at the surface when there was liquid water more abundant and more stable than it is today. Or you go to places like the crater lakes. I showed Jezero and Gale. And that's what the Perseverance rover is doing. It's tootling around inside and now outside of Jezero crater, collecting samples for exactly that reason. Samples that were exposed to liquid water for a long time and might retain some chemical remnant of it. Specifically, I would go to Jezero crater because that's where the damn samples are right now. If you're going to go somewhere else, you've got to start from scratch collecting them. And I would go with a robotic sample return mission, because it doesn't have to be $12 billion and 15 years to do it.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. Now, what about Mars sample return? And you know, those samples that are out there, I don't know if everyone knows about that, but and they could go pick them up, but it's very expensive. Would it be better to send humans to go get them?
Oh, that's not going to be expensive at all.
Yeah.
Really? If you go one way, if you go on a one-way trip, you're not bringing the samples back.
Oh, that's true.
Pick them up and throw them.
Yeah.
You know, we could rely on people. And I think it's a very clever idea to say, this is too expensive to do a robotic mission. We'll wait till we send people at 100 times the cost. But more importantly, I think there are so many things we don't know about the Mars environment that I think we need to know in order to be able to do a human mission. And we're going to learn a lot of it by bringing samples back. So I would argue it is in our best interest to go and bring those samples back from Jezero. And we learn about how to do round trip to Mars, planetary protection, contaminants within the soil that could be harmful to people, the radiation environment. How to launch off the surface of another planet when the one-way light time can be 20 minutes. We've never done that with people. You always have a real-time crew of 100 people in the control blockhouse monitoring everything. We've never done it without that. We need to learn how to do that.
And then if we bring them back, first question, what does that facility need to be? Or, you know, I don't know if you want to get into that much detail, but to protect the earth, you know, because we don't want, it's not going to be COVID, but it could be something else.
I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
We certainly need to worry about what's called backward contamination.
Yeah.
If
right.
we bring a sample from Mars back to Earth and it has hazardous organisms in it, we want to make sure we don't inadvertently release them.
Right.
And that's not a trivial problem.
If we're bringing those back, well, so do you think we should bring it back to a space station? Maybe the Chinese space station?
Volunteer today.
The way I've heard that described is, yeah, bring it back. And if the astronauts get sick on the space station, you're gonna just leave them up there?
No, but maybe you could decontaminate before you bring.
Inject chlorine into their veins.
Yeah.
Bleach, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, chlorine bleach.
Yeah. And then how do you convince the public that this would be a good thing to bring the samples back? You know, that's where maybe they need to be taken to a space station and that, but the moon, but we don't want to pollute the moon. Either, right?
I don't have a good answer right now.
Okay.
That's a rabbit hole we could spend the rest of the night talking about. So I'm gonna just punch so we don't have to.
Yeah.
And one more here, and then after this, we'll check with the Zoomers.
It's like sending like information encoded in polymers as being a signature of life potentially. And whether that be through amino acids or nucleotides, or some other chemistry. Do you have any thoughts on the sensing modality for that? So for example, like solid state nanopores, like on surface versus like chromatography or spectrometry.
So the question was, do I have any sense of that? And the answer is no. That is so far outside of my field that I think I understood most of the words you used. But I wouldn't, no, that's okay. I wouldn't swear to it. My specialty is understanding Mars. And
sensors on the surface for versus the sample return technique.
Oh, that I can comment on, sensors on the surface versus sample return. You can do a lot more if you bring the samples back, because we've got, you know, hundreds of instruments that measure different things. Some of those instruments are as big as this room. And if you do it on the surface, you've got the spacecraft maybe the size of this table up front, and you can have a couple of instruments the size of a bread box, and that's it. So you can do infinitely more back on Earth.
So like a solid state nanopore is like the size of a business card, it's a microfluidic device. I guess that's, I know like David Deemer is proposed. I just didn't know if you had any comments.
No, because I just don't know enough about it.
Okay, let's see if there's any Zoomers at
I
home.
have a question. This is from the Zoom.
All right, go ahead.
I have actually two questions. One, have any materials been brought back that are not, that do not exist here on Earth, number one? And number two, why are we assuming that life of any kind takes the shape of any form of life on Earth?
The answer to the first question is yes. I was reading just within this month, and we're not very far into the month, about identification of a mineral on the surface of Mars that has been discovered there for the first time. But it's the level of things like minerals, not new elements or anything like that. And the second question, that's really a concern because people want to make sure we're not biasing what we look for through narrowing down too much our scope of what we're looking for. People are trying to come up with, there's a phrase for this. Give me just a second. I'm not coming up with it. They're trying to come up. It's late. They took me out drinking beforehand. That's my
I
excuse.
was just thinking of, we're a carbon-based life,
Yeah.
there might be a silicon-based life out there. I mean, we've developed computers that now, with artificial intelligence capabilities, there's, 100 years from now, maybe not even 100 years from now, maybe our robots will replicate themselves. I just think we're limiting ourselves to, and there's so many life forms
Right.
here on Earth.
I agree with you completely, and I got caught up trying to think of a phrase. Now I got it. It's agnostic biosignatures, something that would be indicative of life that is not tuned to life on Earth. If you're looking for a DNA molecule, that's very narrowly tuned to life on Earth. But if you're looking for molecules that retain that have some way of encoding genetic information, that's less tuned to life on Earth. People are giving that thought and trying to figure out how to identify something when you don't know what it is you're looking for. And then your comment about
That's why I asked the
silicon-based
question about other materials, because it might be, some life form that is created from something totally different that we don't even know of.
Well, we're stuck with the same elements anywhere that we're going to find on Earth. You asked specifically about silicon-based life, and I think that's exceedingly unlikely. The reason people use silicon is it sits right below carbon on the periodic table, so it has some of the same chemical reactions. Carbon can combine with oxygen and form CO2 and long chain hydrocarbons. When silicon combines with oxygen, it forms quartz, which does not form long chains in the same way. It does not dissolve in water in the same way, and probably is not useful for life. And the better indicator is at the surface of the Earth, silicon is 10,000 times more abundant than carbon, but life uses carbon, and it's because it's that much better.
Well, that might just indicate that maybe it's some kind of element that is so limited that maybe in elsewhere, and it's that based element that gets crereated in a totally different form. I mean, we're
I
even
can't
talking about life, but I don't know. I liked your definition of what life was. But at the same time, I think there's potential for things to replicate themselves without having the same form that we have here on Earth.
I'll agree with you that we need to think of agnostic ways to look for life that aren't tied to life here on Earth. Bob, are you trying to ask a question?
I'm trying to put it in.
Why don't you come up and speak into the mic so I don't have to repeat it?
Type to avoid it. Potential hydrocarbon chemistry, are we looking for life there? Are we looking for precursors of life? Looking for analogs of life? What does the type system mean in hydrocarbon chemistry?
That's a good set of questions. And what I will say, and this is as far as I'll say two things, and that's as far as I'll go. One is surface temperatures below 100 Kelvin. Chemical reactions go very sluggishly, and it's hard to imagine that there's been, unless temperatures were at one time warmer, that there's been enough time for chemical reactions to proceed far enough to give life. The other half of that question is if you go below the surface, Titan probably has water ice interior and water melt. And
Look there instead.
well,
Yeah.
there could be life there where you have liquid water, but how would you see it at the surface?
Looking at dragonfly, I don't really know what it's doing.
Well, take a look and then let's have this discussion. Other questions online?
Yeah, I have a,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Clark. Somebody's,
yeah. Turn your sound up.
somebody's unmuted.
Yeah,
I can still understand you though. Go ahead.
oh no, you are muted. Okay, Bruce, I have a question about your definition of life that says that it has to replicate. Because I can imagine an entity that never dies, therefore doesn't need to replicate.
Fair enough, but I'll give you an even better example. There
I
are
can't hear an
organisms
answer
here on
because
Earth.
you have to turn
that-
the thing up.
Go ahead.
We're having
mute while I'm responding. It's interesting saying he's muted and hearing it repeated 10 times. There are organisms on Earth that are unable to replicate. The canonical example is a mule, cross between a horse and a donkey. If I got that right? Horse and something like that, and they're sterile animals. So are they not alive? Of course they are. These are guidelines and not. I didn't say it was a definition because you can't define it. You have to look at the circumstances taken as a whole. If you have an organism that never dies, well, we can argue that microbes are that because they split, but they never die. The ones that exist today are direct splits from ones that existed 4 billion years ago. It just hit me that there's a good analogy. If you play the stock market, your stock splits. That doesn't mean you have new stock. You just have more of it.
Okay.
You want to follow up on?
Yeah, it was just something that you did imply if you didn't exactly say what I said. One can think of robots, that are suddenly have arrived in the last decade or so, which are built by other beings, but that act like they're alive increasingly with each passing year, and one might call them life, or 20 years from now you might call them life.
Yeah, that's a fair question, and robots are one of the examples people bring up. Suppose you have a factory where robots build robots. Are they reproducing? Does
Right.
that constitute life? There are people who believe that computer life, where they've set up mathematical equations to define how entities on the computer divide and grow, is that life? There are people who believe that that is fully life. I am not one of them.
Okay, well, thanks, Bruce.
Hey, hang on. Anybody else online? Okay, Bob, last question.
Decades ago, it's called Life Beyond Earth. It's by a biochemist and a physicist. And I don't remember their definition in its entirety, but it goes something like this: that to recognize life, it is a system that's characterized by complex cycles that decreases its entropy at the expense of the environment.
Really?
People know it's the manifestation of matter.
Whether I am or not doesn't mean that that defines life. Or
you can sustain it. And if you're constantly able, to maintain that in a systematic and ongoing way. That's what they talk about.
so atmospheric photochemistry would qualify as life because it's maintained at the expense of the environment, which has a different level of entropy.
I'm gonna send you this title.
And I know right where to put it.
All right, any last questions? No, we got one more.
We seem to have drifted into the realm of techno signatures with this conversation about silicon and all that. And there's been sort of a modern discussion of, okay, so we have gas planets and chemical signatures. Maybe that's not what we should be looking for. Maybe we should be looking for like Dyson swarms. We should be looking at like techno signatures of any sort of like reflective suns that only could, like, people are dumping their waste.
Yes, but I'm gonna totally punt on that one. Because I'm thinking about the first paragraph of what I said. I either said or implied that we're talking about microbes. And when we start talking about how to look for intelligent life or techno signatures, that's a whole new ballgame. It's worth an hour on its own, and I encourage you to invite somebody. We can talk about that. That is not me. Thank you all for the opportunity.
That's good. All right, you can
Want this
go
back?
ahead and shut that down. All right, people at home and people here. We're now going to do a computer swap. It'll take a few minutes, and then Leonard will give his usual monthly update on all the cool space stuff. And then we have some interesting photographs that people have taken that we will show. So sit tight.
I think all this is mine and everything
think
else is yours.
Yep. Discuss.
Yeah, good questions, would you say?
They're almost fun questions.
Yeah, really, yeah. And while they're changing this out, we want to do, before I guess.
Hey Dewey, are we still on? Start Zoom again?
Now do you hear me?
Much better. I appreciate, sorry, had to interrupt there.
Yeah, well, when I move the microphone, it turns on mute with the mic, so I have to remember to undo that. Okay, good. You can hear me, so I can get Leonard's presentation and I can share the screen. Hopefully we'll have remembered to do everything I need to remember.
And you know what I was told. From some of that JP.
All right, so are you seeing Leonard's
Lobbying.
title page there, John?
Yep, we are. That looks great.
We're ready to go.
Got clicker thing.
Yeah, I need the clicker thing here for.
All right.
As always.
As always, there's a lot of space stuff happening at the same time. Pretty intensive, but I thought I'd just share a couple of things with you. You know, Starship 10, we had Elon Musk and his Starship that is the interplanetary hope for the future, and it took off.
Yeah, we can't hear.
Yeah, I'm trying to get Dewey's attention. They had some issues with I don't know, the internet there. I'm not sure, but we thought we had resolved it.
I drive on that thing. You know, we're at a point where NASA is running out of runway on the Artemis program. You've got astronauts in training for Artemis as a circumlunar flight. They're hoping to get that off next year, and that's fine. But you know, the issue to me from a journalistic side is that Elon is running out of runway, and somewhere, and it showed up, by the way, by the former NASA administrator Jim Bridenstine on Capitol Hill 2 days ago, or whenever it was, a couple days ago. You know, he's going, you know, we got problems, you know, and this is a NASA administrator. We have an acting NASA administrator. That's how bad NASA is right now. We have acting people everywhere. They're acting, and they're acting and trying to make decisions about the future of the US space program. So not that I'm bitter. You know, but we're you know, literally he's got to get his kind of his Starship in gear here. And a lot of flights have got to happen to prove its use in the Artemis program. I keep an eye on Jeff Bezos and the, you know, Jeff Bezos has his own program going that NASA's fund. Actually, Bezos is, you know, got a lunar lander he's pretty much spent his own money on, and I'd keep an eye on that as a route to the success that we may have to need if the Starship doesn't really come into fruition. So we're at a really, you know, I love all this stuff. Let me tell you, from a writer's standpoint, this is great. Competition, there's all kinds of failure, there's success, there's whatever. Anyway, it's all good, but it's a bit of a mess in the NALU of NASA not being organized enough to make decisions. And you got acting NASA administrator, you've got people on the top leadership of NASA that are leaving, and it's not clear where NASA is going to be able to go. They had a hearing the other day. I think I even mentioned this. What is it? Okay. Does this work? I'm gonna go to the next one.
Must be what Bob Grimm was talking about when he said there's always a problem.
Okay.
That's all I said.
Come on.
I'll make it shorter as I go along.
All right.
Okay, we got,
That's
and
right.
there's the acting administrator with a white shirt on. He's not going anywhere soon. But the other 4 crew members of the Artemis 2 crew, they've been in training for much longer than they ever thought they were going to be training. I'm sure, but this is a circumlunar flight, great crew. I'm sure they'll do great. But you know, if we're going to land on the moon anytime soon, we got to get going. And we are in a space race. This happened because of our own kind of a bureaucratic momentum in our own NASA space agency. China is moving ahead. They had a very successful test of their lunar lander themselves a couple months ago. And on the right there is this huge facility to drop this damn thing and show that they have a lunar lander kind of ready to go. On the left is the Chinese carrier craft for the lunar lander. Two-person crew, 3-person crew, but 2 will go down to the lunar surface. One big thing that happened last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, neutron. You know, this is, you know, I had a chance to meet the head of Rocket Lab, Peter Beck, and great guy, entrepreneur, he's just star quality. Anyway, at Wallops Island in Virginia, they inaugurated a launch pad for their neutron rocket, which is pretty damn big. Eventually it could carry humans, but it has a huge launch complex as they're building, and they completed already. But it was really a pretty spectacular premiere of this facility in Wallops Island. So keep an eye on that. And why I'm keeping an eye on this is because my buddy here has got a probe to Venus. And Bruce talked about Venus, but this is Sarah Seeger from MIT. She's developed a private Venus probe. And it looks like everything is headed toward being launched on a neutron rocket by Rocket Lab. Probably early next year, we'll see. But anyway, it's an atmospheric probe, lasts a couple minutes, could take some pretty interesting measurements of the potential for, organics in the Venus atmosphere. We'll see where it goes, but this is a whole, kind of an interesting new development about private sector doing space science missions. Don't rely on NASA. Let the private sector do it. So we'll see how that goes, but she's great. One thing to watch for, I'm a big UFO, kind of a anti-pro-con believer that something is going on with unidentified aerial phenomenon There's a new hearing coming up, next week on Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday. And, this one is pretty interesting. We've had a couple of these hearings where they're trying to get to the core of what are these things that we're seeing? Pilots seeing these UAPs. Are they drones from other countries? Are they, what are they? And unfortunately, this whole thing has gotten wrapped up in the UFO, which is an unidentified flying object. And you've got a whole folklore with crash, Roswell, they're dragging aliens out of there. They're trying to figure out where they're from, and do they have an ID? Are they immigrants or, so anyway, we're gonna have a hearing. I don't know what's gonna come out of this. There's a pretty interesting list of people that are gonna be witnesses. But I keep track on this because this has the potential of leading people down the road a little bit more about, are we alone in the universe or not? And keep an eye on that. That's going to be Tuesday, a new hearing. The other thing that I found, wrote about was Russia launched, kind of what they call the biosatellite, and had 75 mice in there, fruit flies, all kinds of crazy, all kinds of stuff. They launch this thing, it goes into polar orbit because it gets more radiation. And they're trying to figure out, what can, astronauts actually go pole to pole and not be, have some radiation damage. But this thing is up there for about 30 days. They launched it a couple of days ago. Pretty interesting, but Russia's got some fascinating biology experiments on there, and there's a bunch of other kind of interesting experiments they're doing, but it'll last for 30 days. It'll come down in Russia, they'll parachute down the capsule and then drag out all the mice, and they have their special container. But anyway, it's pretty cool. Then this is the weirdest story I wrote. Somebody was worried about falling on the moon. So at MIT, he creates a spacesuit with all these extra arms. So if you fall down on the moon, you can use these to get up. And that was pretty bizarre. So I wrote about that. And in the future, next time we talk, given all what Bruce said, all the Venus stuff going on, biosatellite, is the future really scrubbed, or are we really going to see something unique and new? We don't know yet, but it's pretty cool. I'm having a blast writing this stuff. It's just amazing what's going on. And it's really a time to break glass and pull out the dice and roll them. We're not sure what's going to come out of all this, but I think that was it. That's about as far as I can get.
Any questions for Leonard?
Don't ask too many.
It's going, I'm having a blast, and he's like, God, I got all these transcriptions.
Yeah, right.
Let's go out on the deck and drink wine.
Yeah, that's it.
It's all part of it, right?
Incredible.
Well, I got a kick out of the mystronauts thing that the Russians are doing, because decades ago, I believe the conversation was actually between Robert Zubrin and Elon Musk
Yeah.
about what can we do to further figure out about sending humans to Mars. And I think Zubrin came up with this off the top of his head, though he may have been thinking about it, which is the idea that we know a lot about humans living in Earth gravity.
Yeah.
We've got quite a bit of data now about humans living in zero gravity. We have no information on any organism living in Martian gravity. So his idea was to send mice up into orbit in a rotating craft that produced Martian gravity. and let them live up there for a while.
Yeah.
And then bring them down and see what affected them. And then one idea he had I thought was pretty good was what you do is you send up pregnant mice. And then the pregnant mice give birth to little baby mice, and then you get to watch the little baby mice grow up until they become adolescents, at which point you don't want all those mice in, you know, the same little habitat things because they get a little too rowdy. But that would be the time you go, okay, they're getting too old now, bring them down, cut them up, find out how they develop. But it's interesting that.
Well, let me tell you a little thing, that's enough from me, but, I look, you know, every morning I can't tell you how many websites I go through that are just amazing. And one of them I found was from Russia. And it was the Biosatellite 1 that they launched. And they had mice in there, and it was in a different orbit. And anyway, they land the thing, and they have medical crews coming up to the unpiloted capsule, hauling all the animals out of there. And the one thing that I saw that made me almost nauseous, the poor mice are sitting in containers with nothing but poop around them, you know, and they're dragging these mice. They're still alive, but they're dragging them out of this capsule. And it was like 75 of those things in a container.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's pretty impressive what they've done. And, you know, as far as I know, the poop is on display in Moscow. I don't know.
Space poop.
Yeah, yeah, well, they're selling that, carving it up. You can buy a little sample of it. It's on Yahoo.
Was the Russian Bios 2 satellite spinning at Martian gravity?
No, it's really a stable orbit, and it'll be coming down in a couple weeks. It lands in Russia, but their main thing was to go into polar orbit to expose all the material to more radiation than normal. And the first biosatellite 1 was in a more equatorial orbit, if I remember. So, you know, they're doing great stuff. And, you know, to me, one thing to watch is the Russians are coming back with their space program. China is really formidable right now, but I'd watch Russia. There are some clear signs that Putin, money is being poured into the damn Russian space program, and I think they're going to have another heyday. And working also, they just signed an agreement with China on their, you know, doing research together. Putin was just over there a couple days ago, and they signed a memorandum. And I think they're going to be in cooperation. So, you know, Russia and China, it's formidable. And I think that's why Ted Cruz from Texas had a hearing the other day about, you know, China, you know, how paranoid are we? And they were paranoid. There was four witnesses up there, and you know, yeah, welcome.
Hey, Leonard.
Yeah.
Duffy made a comment the other day that about China going to the moon, and he says, no way are they going to go there before we do.
Well, that's good to say.
So I just wondering whether, you know, that might spur something, or is that's just another lie of the administration?
You know what I think all this is about. I mean, I'm too old now, but I mean, I went through the first space race with the former Soviet Union. I hear nothing but beep, 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 beep. This is Sputnik 1 over again, and we're going to go through it again. It's going to be, it's a space race, and, you know, there is a paranoid aspect to all this, that whoever gets to the moon first, and at the South Pole of the moon, can start setting up real estate operations and, you know, claim certain craters that have more ice in them. And who knows where it's
Well,
gonna go.
I think the
It's
biggest
fun.
issue, the
For
biggest
me, it's
issue.
fun. It's just paranoia. The more paranoia, the more copy I sell. You know, it's really awesome. I'm
Leonard,
telling you, you
I
can
think
get
the
away with
real,
murder on this
Leonard,
stuff.
Leonard, I think the real paranoia is the fear that if Russia and China get people on the moon and get, established there, that there's potential for military work that we're not going to be able to fight.
No.
I think she was coming.
That's a new story coming.
Yeah.
Wait for anti-satellites.
Anyway, the MIT some students at MIT were working on this mice thing. And I saw a presentation where they showed what they had in mind. And the mice habitats, if this is the axis of the spacecraft, so it rotates around like this, they had these habitat modules that were kind of long this way, and that's where the mice would live. And they'd have multiple habitats so the mice aren't interfering and getting around with each other. And when I saw that, I was disappointed because I wanted the habitat to go around this way so we could get that famous scene from 2001 where the guy is running around the track and goes up, and you'd be able to have a camera mounted there and see the mice doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you'd find out whether the mice preferred to go in one direction or the other. Because depending on which direction they go, they might get heavier, but if they go the other direction, they actually get lighter.
Yeah. The best thing about artificial gravity, if you're in a space hotel, you know, the chocolates will stay on the pillow.
All right, thanks, Leonard.
All right.
John Astrolos is gonna show some pictures of a thing he did recently.
What?
Howdy.
Some of you may have heard, I went down to Tucson about 4 weeks ago, and it was supposed to be a business trip, and it was, but since they weren't paying me to go down there, I said, well, I'm taking my time and I'm gonna check out a few things. So let's see, Dewey's putting it up for me. And due to, of course, time constraints, I cut it down a lot. Must have taken 800 pictures, but I stopped at the Nuclear Science Museum in Albuquerque. And here's an F-105 with the replica test tower in the background. Let's see, do I need thank you.
Let's make sure it's working. It always needs to be kicked once,
Yeah, and then it works, usually.
and then it works.
Oh, and of course, we're not seeing the whole picture.
So there.
Yeah.
What?
And of course, the picture goes way out to here, but for some reason we're not seeing it. Probably because it's an old version of PowerPoint. I don't know. Hard to say. And that's a Nike Hercules, some of which I had in my a few miles away from my house when I was growing up. And I didn't know back then that we had nuclear warheads, you know, just a few miles away, but they did. And there's the replica of the Fat Man next to a B-29 that's sitting there. And this was like 95 degrees walking around out there.
But explain what Fat Man.
Yeah.
That was one of the first, I think that was the plutonium bomb.
Little boy and fat man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the ones that was dropped on, was it Hiroshima or Nagasaki?
Well, that's the weaponized version of the gadget that they
The gadget, right?
did it both, yeah.
This is a replica of what was dropped, yeah. And of course, a lot of times it's fun to take pictures so you can read it later, but. And now we're moving up to the 1980s. This is the upper stage, the final stage of the MX missile. And this is the part that distributes 10 MIRVs. Two
Which
different
are
areas.
multiple
Independent reentry vehicles. So, of course, any trip to Arizona when you're already in Albuquerque wouldn't be complete without stopping at the VLA on. There's not that much to see there because they don't let you get real close anymore to any of the antennas. So I guess you'd have to know somebody that could take you around.
We do.
Hook you up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I had fun talking to someone at the visitor center for a few minutes. And, it's a nice break. And so I camped out at Luna Lake in eastern Arizona near Alpine, which is 7,800 feet. And it was just gorgeous up there. And you think of Arizona as being, saguaro cacti and all that. But there's actually a lake here. In fact, I think that's probably the lake there, but I'm in the camping area. And the weather wasn't the best for observing, and the moon was gibbous and cloudy and drizzly when I went to bed. So, it was okay for that kind of stuff. And coming back from getting some water, there was this giant spider. This is a cell phone picture, by the way. So that spider was about 2.5 inches across. I think it was a wolf spider. And great blue heron. But it's really dark there. Alpine, which is several miles away, is population of 100, and that's all spread out all over the place. And I did get up in the middle of the night, and the moon had gone down, and it was clear. And the Andromeda Galaxy was so visible that you could see the color of the center of the galaxy and see the dark lane as like an eyebrow over it. And you think that that's something you need a big telescope for. And it looked kind of big. But that's like Bortle 1 or something, which is a medium dark sky. Unfortunately, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is the Morenci mine. It's 14 miles long, and they built the highway through the mine. And this is a pullover where you can look at everything. But there's a road from Alpine, and if you ever gone to Yellowstone, Rock Springs, Moab, Canyon de Chelly, or Morenci, it's the same highway. It goes from Canada down to Mexico, 191. But between Alpine and Morenci mine, there's like 450 curves full of suicidal deer and a bear and all kinds of squirrels that want to test your reaction time.
What about bunnies? Did you have bunnies?
Oh, rabbits too. And this is a panorama for a 4-panel panorama, but some reason PowerPoint isn't set up properly by me, I guess. Unfortunately.
We can imagine.
And this is one of the highlights of the trip. Business has to do with building some telescopes, but it's probably as far as I should go into it. This is the large binocular telescope on top of Mount Graham. And remember 25 years ago or something about the Mount Graham squirrel, and it was going to be endangered? That's the telescope they were building at the time. Also, there's the Vatican telescope, and there's a millimeter wave telescope up there too. I forgot the acronym for that one.
No.
And here is one of the mirrors. It's dense packed inside the building. So this is a fisheye lens, by the way, photo. And this right here, light goes up to a secondary mirror out of the view, and it comes back down to this structure where a mirror gets swung in a way, and the beam is diverted into one of these 3 ports where they can either combine it with the beam on the other side or do something in the two other ports. This is, looking at the overall structure. So we have one 8.4 meter mirror here and one on the other side. It's just gigantic. I think it's about a $500 million facility. Oh, well, another panorama, but this one was showing both mirrors. They got cut off. Oh, wow. And here's another view of the like similar to a Dobsonian telescope, the elevation bearings. And that was the trip there. I also went to the Pima Air Museum, Aerospace Museum, and that's a B-36. This was like only 102 on this day.
Yeah, right.
Fortunately, when I was 115 in Tucson, I was up on top of Mount Graham, so it wasn't so bad. And then I went left there. Oh, well, there's something that's not in order, but that's figured. I went back through the Salt River Canyon, which is really kind of photogenic, but not that many people like going through there. And it's not quite as deep as the Grand Canyon, but you can drive right through it.
Can raft it too. Great rafting.
Oh, yeah, the water looked a little shallow for rafting this time of year, but yeah. I was down there.
Yeah, right.
Good for hiking.
Yeah. There were some people waiting around in there.
Wow.
It was a little stormy right then, but yeah, it's okay. But I forgot to show these earlier. This is, oh, and of course, you can only see about half the picture again for some reason. I don't get it. But I stopped and shot some pictures of this 1790 something mission San Javier del Bac down in Tucson. And went over there around sunset.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, again, it showed everything there, but it got cut off. Oh, yeah, and well, you see something on the top, I don't know, white on the top, that wasn't in the picture. Yeah, I mean, the picture goes down to about here, whatever. And then this got cut off.
What's the?
This is the Painted Desert on the way back.
Oh.
So I left, went through the Salt River Canyon, camped around Sholo, and then next morning I got up early and got to the Painted Desert. And it was early in the morning, so the color was pretty good. This is Petrified Forest, where looks like the lizard's tail got cut off, but it really was in the picture. Trust me.
Was he from?
I was just waiting for something.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a whole log here. I don't know what happened to that picture. Yeah, petrified log. Now I got to Chaco Canyon, and that's a hard place to get to because of the bad roads. And I accidentally dropped some ice cubes out of my cooler. Lizards know all about ice cubes. It drank that whole ice cube up, and then I threw another one out, and it was back for more. It just stuck around and waited, to watch the ice melt. But it's a thing apparently with lizards. They know whenever there's any water around. It's really dry there at first, and about 97 degrees. Yeah, there's some of the ruins at Chaco Canyon. You can actually go through that, and I did, and it's kind of neat. So here's the astronomical connection. By the way, that was the morning after the Perseid maximum, but of course the moon was just about full, and it was hazy from wildfire smoke. So yeah, Oh, man. Well, I went to Chama and got some pictures on the way back and got some pictures of the train, but again, of course, you can see the building where the train is being worked on and the whole engine is in the original picture, but it is what it is. These are only 1,500 by 1,000. I don't know how they got so cut off, but I don't know. Okay, that's it.
All right, folks, we're almost done.
Okay.
We got, John Williams has a couple pictures that people have sent him that he has, and picture that David Elmore took that he's gonna show.
Okay,
Did you have something?
good. Yeah. Do you want to do this?
Yeah.
I just want to say, one thing we think we'd like to do, October 4th, I believe, is observe the moon night. And at Fisk Planetarium, Jack Burns is gonna be there, and you could look through their telescopes, which is pretty cool, if it's clear, of course. But there's gonna be a presentation and show there. And I'm not sure if that would take the place of our meeting, probably not, we'd probably do something later. But if you want to go to that, make sure you're on our list and we'll send you a notice before that. I think William and I wanna go, we know Jack Burns really well. Another good speaker who we'll probably have up here too. So just wanted to mention, okay.
So you all, John was talking about the VLA not being able to get into it, but on October 11th, there's an open house. So John, you can get this kind of pick. And there is a time in December, I think it's in December, when they open it up at night. So you can there's only one time a year, and I'll let you know. So yeah, I'm in Photoshop, so we can zoom around and stuff. Is Dave Elmore in the audience today?
Yes.
All right. So I'll get to his picture last because it blows everything else away. This summer in Santa Fe, it's been like this, which looks pretty, but it's very hard to get much else. But we got a great moonrise the other night, even with all the clouds. I said moonrise. This was moonset. I apologize. Before about a month and a half ago, oh gosh, it might have been even 2 months ago, I was able to get the Rosette Nebula with the Trifid Nebula, which
Terrific.
you want to zoom where on the Trifid?
The Lagoon Nebula.
This is the lagoon. You're right. I'm sorry. We don't want to zoom in on that because my stars are a little round. Yikes. Anyway, here you go, David.
Wow. So John talked about going to a dark site. I have a telescope at a rented observatory in southern New Mexico at a dark site, and a project to take pictures of fuzzy blobs in the sky. In particular, I was going for the two tiny little blobs at the bottom, Sharpless 2-100 and Sharpless 299, that I had not yet recorded on my list, but I decided to frame it so I could pick up some other things. The background at the site where I observed is faint enough so that with the filters I use, a given pixel in a given minute might detect a photon. So that's necessary to bring out faint nebulosity. This is a huge field of view. It's as wide as the palm of your hand held at arm's length in Cygnus. It could be right up here. And it shows a lot of debris in the Milky Way.
Question, how many pixel or photons does it take to fill up the well?
0.25 times 65,535, 16,000.
So yeah, it'll take a while, but yeah, I get it.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
So this is a region in the Milky Way where clouds of gas, you can see kind of dark clouds in the middle, are compressing, heating up. You compress a gas and it heats. If you compress a gas enough, you can heat it up to 10 million degrees and have a star. So this is where stars are being formed. An active star forming region is the Tulip Nebula, which is kind of right of center here. Stars live their lives. Big massive ones blow up and distribute gas all over the place, which is most of what you see. Let's go kind of upper left, John, to a blue circular object. Keep going. There we go. That blue object is an area where a star that's more like our sun spent billions of years living its life. When it ran out of hydrogen, it compressed, heated up, started burning helium, went through another phase, finally blew off an atmosphere of oxygen and compressed again, heating up, but not enough to fuse any more atoms. So there's a white dwarf star in the center of that object. So this field of view, let's zoom back out, John, is just riddled with all kinds of things that have happened in the galaxy. So in looking for fuzzy blobs in the sky, that's a good place to go. This is not what it would look like with your eye. It's photographed through 3 filters, which are well known from Hubble: hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, sulfur 2. So these particular filters isolate emission from those atomic species. Well, with the camera, you get just a black and white image from hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, sulfur 2. How do I mix them back together again? I could pick any colors I want. So a famous Hubble image of the pillars of creation you might have seen, they said, oh, let's just color hydrogen green, sulfur red, oxygen blue, independent of what they actually are. Right. In this picture, I said, let's make hydrogen red because hydrogen is actually red. Let's make oxygen teal because it actually is teal. And then I had sulfur left over. Sulfur is actually redder than hydrogen. So what do I do with 2 reds? So I mixed it back in as yellow. Sulfur is yellow. So there's art involved in creating an image like this and how you mix your color palette. But the art also brings out those atomic species because each has its own color. Yeah. So this is my remote telescope. If it were clear in New Mexico, I wouldn't be here. I'd be across the hall at home, logged into my computer.
Question for you, David. Whoa, went crazy. This area. I'm sorry.
What do you say?
So there's a lot of detail. 562 megapixel to start with.
Yeah. So David, we didn't do this tonight, but I'd love to have you share Mazatlan for the eclipse. We've never seen, because you're always down at your telescope. Maybe at our next meeting.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah. Going to do that?
Yeah. Okay, that's a wrap, folks. So we can end the Zoom meeting.
You like the photo?
Right. So everybody, we're going to do we just want everybody up here for a quick one. Everybody up before we pack up the chairs and